Welcome to the Probate Pod with Jason Siegel of the Siegel Law Firm, a podcast covering important topics in estate planning and probate in Florida. Jason serves the Treasure Coast and South Florida. Thanks for tuning in, and now here's Jason Siegel.
Hi, this is Jason Siegel with the Siegel Law Firm, and this is another special edition episode of the Probate Podcast where we talk about estate planning and probate issues. So today is a really special podcast, and why? Because we have a really special guest. Now, one of the things that you often hear about me on the Probate Podcast, or if you come into my office in St. Lucie, is you want to avoid probate on your homestead property in St. Lucie County. You want to make sure that if something happens to you, the house goes automatically to your beneficiaries pursuant to the terms of the trust and does not have to go through probate. But what I always also tell you is there's some things that you need to make sure you do when you put your home into a trust. Maybe the most important thing to do is make sure that you contact your local property appraiser and update the homestead exemption to the name of the trust, because you don't want to lose your homestead exemption. So if there was one person I would want to know and be able to speak to in St. Lucie County about how to do that, it would be the property appraiser herself. And Michelle, thank you so much for joining today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So Michelle, if you can just briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself and about your office.
Absolutely. So Michelle Franklin, St. Lucie County Property Appraiser. I was honored to be elected by the voters of St. Lucie County in late 2016, taking the oath of office in January of 2017. It has been a true pleasure, especially during this interesting time in St. Lucie County where we have grown exponentially.
A couple more people living in St. Lucie County, right?
More parcels, more people, and yes, it's been very interesting time.
So tell us about what the property appraiser in St. Lucie County does.
So the property appraiser actually has three main responsibilities. Number one, we're going to place a value on every parcel of land. So currently in St. Lucie County, we're at about 186,000, almost approaching 187,000 parcels of land. We're going to value tangible personal property accounts. That's about just over 14,000 tangible accounts. We're going to apply exemptions to those, either tangible accounts or parcels of land, which to date we have just under 100, right around 100 different types of exemptions. Most of us can't qualify for all of those, institutional, educational, things like that, but there's 100 in total. And then we're the official mapper of the county. So every time a developer comes in and parcels out land, files for a plat, every time you or I as an individual property owner decide we want to combine with the lot next door or maybe split properties from the lot next door, we're redrawing that map.
Okay. So today I wanted to talk about a very important exemption that a lot of us are familiar with. It seems to be on the voting roll almost every kind of voting
Seems like that, doesn't it?
It does, right? So the homestead exemption, right? Tell us a little bit about what is the homestead exemption in Florida related to taxes in the property appraiser's office.
Sure. So let me take you back just before we get too far. Originally, a homestead was a $25,000 exemption and a 3% cap on your value. So that means that the market value could not increase, or excuse me, the assessed value, because there's three values on every notice. Market is the true for tax purposes. Assessed is minus that 3% cap that homestead benefit brings you, and then a taxable value that you're truly paying taxes on. Okay. So we're going to take our market value that we've determined in the office on January 1 each year. We're going to minus that 3% cap that is accruing every year. You're getting 3% in 2020, 3% in 21, 3%. Doesn't have to be a full 3%. It can be up to 3%. So some years there was not an increase, or there was a 0.5% increase. Okay. So it's 3% or less. And then you get the benefit of the exemption, which originally started as a $25,000 exemption. Today well, I should back up to last year, actually. It was a $50,000 exemption. Okay. And as you stated on the last election, we as Florida voters, 60% of Florida voters decided we should increase that. So going forward, it's going to change. That second $25,000 exemption is going to change based on the CPI each year. Okay.
And the CPI, the Consumer Price Index.
Exactly. Good job.
I
usually say that, but you beat me to it.
I know a lot of acronyms, you know.
There you go. So this year we're actually going to see the benefit of $50,277. Okay. And then the 3%, or up to 3% cap on the property for our homestead parcels within St. Lucie County.
Okay, so a big misconception or a big mistake people make is people do their trust and then they don't update with the property appraiser or the homestead exemption. So why is it important that they do that once they put their house into a revocable trust in Florida?
So if they're putting the property into a trust, they're removing it out of their individual name, right? So anytime there is any change made to a deed, you need to talk to the property appraiser's office, okay? If that property was homesteaded originally, Jason homesteaded his property, we know that Jason owns it. Jason has the ability to own and occupy on January 1, which is a requirement of the homestead exemption. Jason puts his property into a trust, you may or may not still have the benefit to occupy and receive the homestead benefit on that property. So what we do is we need a new application, which is a quick and easy process. And then we need to see possibly a copy of the trust. It kind of depends. There's a couple different ways things can be filed and done. Obviously, I'm not telling you anything you don't know about trust, but we need to see that documentation. Usually just like the table of contents tell us right where to go to. For the homestead language, we look at that part. We're not trying to look at, what Jason's doing with any personal property or anything like that. That's not our business.
Perfect. So like there in the trust, there's like language like in our document says like you have the right to reside, you're entitled to homestead exemption. So it's a really important thing. And a lot of out-of-state trusts sometimes will not have that language because it's not contemplated in other states. So that's the language that you and your team are looking for.
Exactly. And that's what we see most often. And the thing that I share with property owners when I meet them is use a Florida attorney because they know about Florida laws, right?
Everyone loves talking to attorneys, right? It's the best thing to do.
In my experience, yes.
In my experience too, I like to think that as well, right?
We'll go with that.
We're going to go with that. So we talked about the specific language, and is this something? You mentioned the application process. I mean, how long would you say it takes for a normal homeowner to update this?
If they come into the office, I would plan maybe 15 minutes, as long as there's no wait. During certain times of the year, we do have an influx of customers come in. But we also offer appointments. So you can, I like to say that's our Disney Fast Pass.
Yeah.
So you schedule an appointment, come right in. It'll be done in less than 15 minutes. You can file online as well. If you're comfortable with that. If you can type in your name and hit enter, you can get it done online as well. And then send us the documentations as necessary, email, fax.
So it can be uploaded or sent over. So you can do it online. You can make an appointment. I know on the website, there's a place that says book here.
Yep.
And you can make an appointment. So that's a great way. I always tell people to make appointments because that Fast Pass, I don't even want to go to Disney anymore. But if you do go to Disney,
it's
you're
probably
making
better
sure
than the Disney Fast Pass now, huh?
Disney Fast Pass ain't that fast anymore, right?
And remember, we have two locations. So there's one in St. Lucie West, in the courthouse in St. Lucie West at 250 Country Club Drive, or here in Fort Pierce, 2300 Virginia Avenue.
So let's say that someone goes ahead and they meet with an attorney, or they do it themselves and don't do it right. A couple years later, they realize, oh my goodness, I no longer have the homestead exemption. Is there anything that can be done at that point?
Unfortunately, there's not. So our tax roll goes to Tallahassee. And once that tax roll is complete and signed off, it's done. So depending what time of year this occurs and when you realize that it occurred, I always tell people to call us regardless. We're going to do everything we can to assist. But I don't want to give anybody false hope that, oh, this happened to me 2 years ago, I can fix it. You can't. So if it occurred on, let's say February 3rd, and it's now May, whatever today's date is, and you realize maybe there's something we can do for this year, it can be corrected. But if you did it in in February of 2020, and you're coming to us now in 2025, there's nothing we can do.
Gotcha.
Once that homestead is gone, it's gone. And that can be thousands of dollars. The first year in St. Lucie County, it's going to save the average resident around $900. Every year thereafter, because of that 3% cap, it can be more and more and more. It just depends on the market.
With the Saver Homes, the 3% cap, that can make a huge difference over time.
Huge.
So
I've seen people with over $500,000 of value that they weren't paying taxes on because of that benefit.
So one of the other things too is, let me give you a hypothetical, right?
Yeah.
Someone comes into my office on June 1st, they sign a trust. We go ahead and do a deed into the trust. We record it. Then they go on, I've had this happen, I'm going on vacation
Yep.
for 2 months. What is the date that they have to make sure that they update the homestead exemption by?
That is such a hard question
Okay.
because the law says that you have to apply by March 1 of the tax year that you are looking for that benefit.
Okay.
Okay. So if it happened, you said in
In
June
June of this
of
year.
2025, they technically have until March of 2026. But why I say it's a difficult question is I feel like we're all human and life happens, and
Mhm.
sometimes time gets away from us and we forget. We make every effort in the office to help people. We send out letters. Hey, we see you put your property into a trust. Please
Mhm.
come file.
Yeah.
Don't forget about your exemption. But we always don't know what's going on with every
Of course.
single person, 186,000 parcels. So sometimes things fall through the cracks. You actually have until we won't tell anybody until
Okay.
September of that year.
Okay.
Because I will take late applications, which Tallahassee oversees our tax roll. They allow us to take applications all the way through our trim period, which ends up in early September.
Mhm.
And so I will take those all the way through September. I don't encourage people to wait till the last minute. I encourage people to do it immediately and do it online. But we can legally take them until September,
Okay.
and I'll take them up until that last
And,
date.
and I so much agree with you. And I always tell my clients in the office, I said, once we do this, I want you to immediately update it because life
You forget.
happens. My 12-year-old daughter tells me all the time that I forget often, but maybe that's intentional. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's really important to do it immediately. And I will also tell you this as well. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. But I'll tell you that I was telling this to Michelle before we started that the office in St. Lucie, the property appraiser, is just so incredible. Michelle and her team, they are just so nice and accommodating. And I always was joking around earlier, when you call, this is crazy, you don't get this crazy voicemail, but they actually pick up the phone most of the time. So this is an amazing place to live. And it has an amazing team, including Michelle Franklin, the property appraiser.
Thank
I
you.
want to thank you for joining us and really
My pleasure.
provided some amazing insight today. And this has been another exciting episode of the Probate Podcast.